I know more of this world than you have even dreamed. That is why I must destroy it.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now somewhere in upstate New York. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hello, Brian.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Can't complain. Doing all right. Get to talk about X-Men. Always happy when that's happening. And get to talk about one of my favorite characters, Rogue. So...
Yeah. We haven't really talked about Rogue yet, so I'm excited to have this deep dive, pun intended, this deep flying dive into Rogue's psychology. I would just want to send a thank you to all of our listeners and folks who follow us and folks on the Discord for their patience and for being a part of our community. It's been a couple weeks since we've had an episode, and folks have still been pretty engaged and active and sending us notes. And I appreciate y'all so much. So thank you. Thanks for listening.
And I just want to let you all know that Drea's not the only one that appreciates you. I, too, appreciate you so much. We've just been so incredibly busy. We've been shooting Kickstarter videos, not for anything we're doing, but for things other people are doing that we know. We've been engaged in other projects that we're not allowed to talk about at the moment. Slowly but surely, those things are making their way out into the world. But it has been taking up a lot more time than we have normally had just sort of taken from us, but we're happy to be involved in these things. We're just sad that we don't get to watch and talk about X-Men quite as much as we normally do.
Well, look, this is my favorite project.
Yeah.
It is probably, I wouldn't want to say the most unrecognized by any stretch at all. But I'd say one that is certainly one of my favorite projects, but isn't necessarily the most seen, the most rewarded.
You're talking about our podcast.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Not the most rewarded, I suppose. I mean, look,
that's
you
a
can't
gentle
argue.
That's a gentle way of saying that sometimes paid projects
come first,
get in the way of the podcast,
Yeah.
But that this is by far the most rewarding when it comes to like
sitting down and having conversations. And
yeah, I love this project.
Yeah.
It just is kind of in a different column.
One thing we can talk about, because this is something that if people have been paying attention online, they would have been able to see. And I'm very proud of you for it, talking about rewarding projects. You're in the new Aliens documentary that is coming out. It appears to have like anyone and everyone who was ever involved with Aliens involved in it. They've interviewed James Cameron, and then just last week they announced that they finally got an interview with Sigourney Weaver. So she is in there, and in a couple of the important like little clips that they have sent out into the world, you are heavily involved in a couple of them. So
I was very, very lucky to be a part of this project. We filmed it around this time last year.
And
actually,
it was called,
earlier than this last year.
Aliens.
It's called Aliens Expanded,
Okay.
and it's a full-length documentary film about the second Alien film in the franchise.
When we say full length, you're not talking
No,
about a
it's like
feature length
double
film.
length.
It's more like a mini series if they decided not to break a mini series up into episodes. This is
Right.
this is going to be a long documentary. There's a lot of material to cover.
Yeah, and it'll probably stream at some point, but if folks want to pick up the actual physical copy, I know a lot of listeners are fans of physical media, you can actually pre-order the Blu-ray right now. I think it's still available. It's aliens-expanded.com. And you'll see all the different faces and names of the folks involved. Again, I'm certainly lucky to be a part of the commentary cast. And
when we say commentary, though, you are part of the cast.
Yes. What is the right phrase? Like,
when
what do you say?
When people hear the word commentary, they tend to think voices on top of the movie as the movie is playing. You're not part of a commentary.
No, I'm a contributor.
You are a commentator. You are talking about the psychological science that you have gleaned from Aliens, but you are a member of this documentary cast.
Look, Brian, I don't get into the technical.
To the nitty-gritty.
I just they call me up, I show up, I sit down in a chair.
I just want people to know that you are involved in the doc itself, as is one of our friends, Charlie De La Zarica, who a lot of people would know as the person responsible for the creation of the original, and I realize this isn't a word, so forgive me, Alien Quadrilogy bonus features. All the documentaries that he created for that are really considered the gold standard for bonus features of that type. He also worked on Blade Runner. In fact, he's the guy, if I'm not misunderstanding, but I'm 99% sure I'm not, he's also the guy who literally sat down with Ridley Scott and recut Blade Runner for Blade Runner The Final Cut. He's the guy who did it. And he has also participated in this documentary with you as well.
Well, you can't have an Aliens documentary without the original documentarian himself, right?
Yeah. This guy knows more about this franchise than anyone could possibly imagine. So I'm glad that he is involved. But I'm also proud of you, and I'm glad that you're involved and you're getting out there and making some cool stuff.
It's a lot of fun, and I'm truly, truly lucky and excited to be a part of that film. So it's up for pre-order now, and as I said, I'm sure it will stream at some point. But if you want that physical copy, go check it out.
Cool. Let's talk about this episode, if we don't have any additional announcements.
I always feel like I have to explain or clarify that we are still covering the first season of the original X-Men animated series, which is happening. This coverage is happening at the same time that X-Men 97 dropped. And
well, the good news is going forward, that's not true anymore, because
that's right.
The finale of X-Men 97 just aired this week. We have not yet been able to see it.
And up till now, I have not gotten my streams crossed and mistook any scenes as being from one series to the other.
I almost did.
No, it's really difficult because there's such a connection. The 97 series is a direct continuation from this series that we're covering. So the characters are the same. The plots and storylines have such similar themes to them. So I'm sure at some point I will get it confused, but so far I have not. So
far, so good. And now you've got a little while to wait before the possibility of that happening again. Although I am getting confused in parts because in addition to watching X-Men, the animated series, first season, and X-Men 97's first season, I'm also following someone on YouTube who does reaction videos, and she is currently watching all the X-Men movies.
Okay.
And X-Men The Final Stand, the third film in the series, is basically the cure. This episode. So, like, I mean,
right. Yeah,
it
I could see that.
Is and it isn't, but it's basically, it's this storyline where there's the opportunity, if you want it, to go seek out literally a cure, quote unquote, for your mutism, not mutism, your mutation.
Yeah.
As Xavier points out to his old friend, Moira McTaggart, don't call it a cure, this is something we're born with. It's not a disease. Although I did point out when we were watching it, you can be born with a disease. But this is not a disease.
So we've got to break down the frameworks that are existing in the X-Men universe, right? That there are people, non-mutants, who believe that this is an aberration. Like this is not only a genetic defect, but something that needs to be cured, something that either needs to be eradicated or like genocide or needs to be
vaccinated,
remedied. Right. And then I think what's also interesting and important to note is that within the mutant community, there are also divisions.
Correct. That's the important part here is that there are mutants who no longer want to be themselves because they just so desperately want to stop trying to mask and fit in. They want to legitimately fit in. Mm-hmm. And this is by no stretch of the imagination a far stretch from what real people have to deal with on a daily basis anyway.
And we'll talk about where that comes from psychologically, because I think there's a lot of shame and guilt about wanting to be something that you're not.
Yeah.
And we've got to really unpack the pressures and the environmental contributors to feeling like that and kind of like take away some of that guilt and blame and really look at the vulnerability here. And Rogue,
there's the guilt from both sides. There's the guilt that you are different, and then there's the guilt that you want to not be different from the other side.
And I think what's interesting about this episode, I could be mistaken, but is it mostly mutants? Like this episode, aside from one character in the very beginning at the chalet.
You're just talking about the girlfriend.
I'm not even sure if she had a name. That was a human person, non-mutant.
Yeah.
And
everybody else.
I'd say the majority of the episode features all characters who are mutants with various perspectives and ideologies. And there's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of, vitriol and sides and painful emotions. And it's a group of mutants. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really interesting way to show that even within the mutant community, you have these very strong reactions and strong feelings that ultimately creates division.
Yeah.
But, again, is really based in something that isn't superficial. This is, truly the way that people feel about their identities. And there are even some interactions that I'll mention later that I appreciated, that I think as a kid watching this may have gone over your head or over my head, but now really have a profound, sentiment between these characters. So maybe you can start with this idea of this cure. Obviously, this stemmed from the comics, and this is something not even new to the show. This idea of a cure for mutants has come up before. But now we're talking about an island that I know has been referenced a lot before this episode, and that's Muir Island.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about what is up with this island. Last time we talked about an island, it did not go well.
We're seeing people fully fleshed out who we have seen as background characters on that original island as well.
So when you tell me they're going to go to an island to get a cure
in Scotland,
I immediately feel very suspicious. This does not sound good. It does not sound safe. I am ready to see these folks get captured again. So what do we need to know about Muir Island?
Muir Island is, at the risk of going too far into things we've not uncovered yet, because interestingly, I do have listeners commenting in various places that you and I have broken the rules. We have started talking about things as if they were part of the comics and as part, and we've talked about future events and things like that. And we had always made the rule that we would only cover what we have seen in the animated series. Okay. Although we will reference the comics in talking about histories and things like that.
With X-Men especially, it has such a rich history and background that you can't just
avoid it
into it. But that's interesting. Okay, so we got to be a little
unlike
careful.
Batman the Animated Series, when we created that rule, where they were in some cases creating their own origin stories for characters, Eric and Julia Lewald have done a fantastic job with the writers of X-Men 92 in basically condensing and truncating comic book stories into these animated episodes. So we are seeing, in many cases, literal adaptations of some of the things we've already seen and known from the comics, which is why I've always felt comfortable talking about
and it gives
things.
some respect to the writers and creators who started to build these narratives.
Yeah.
So I can see why we get a little bit of wiggle room.
But to answer your question, Muir Island is basically, what we are seeing is a scientific research center sort of helmed by Dr. Gottfried Adler and funded by a very rich, blonde hunk of a man who in his ski chalet talks about Dr. Adler's cure for mutants.
And this is Warren Worthington the third.
Yes, that is correct.
Who we've not seen yet on the show.
At least not in any capacity other than as background.
Okay.
But Warren is revealed to be a mutant himself. He is Angel. And we should note, no, we shouldn't. I'm not going to go into it because that would be future events. Angel is a very, I would even say stereotypical looking angel, very buff, very masculine, very blonde, flowing yellow hair, and big white feathered wings. Mm-hmm. And that is his mutation.
His mutation is the wings and the ability to fly.
Yes. Unlike, say, a penguin, he has wings and can fly.
Okay. Or the penguin, who has no wings and cannot fly.
Has no wings and cannot fly. Yes, his mutation is that he has angelic wings and has the ability to...
So why is he such a jerk?
Because he does not want to be a mutant. He is wealthy. He is... and depending on the backstory you want to go with, he is one of those people who has a deep-seated guilt in not being what is considered normal by normies.
So this is a mutant who can benefit from passing.
He would benefit from passing, yes.
His wings are huge, but he can fit his wings into the back of a ski jacket, if you will. And
it's a little kind of a little suspect.
Just kind of makes him look buff.
He folds them up.
Now I know that's a part of him. I know that's all him. The wings are him.
Right.
Okay.
And I think depending on, I have seen artists' interpretations where, and I'm not sure if every artist considers it this way, but I have seen artist interpretations where the wings will actually fold around him in order to sort of be able to be tucked into coats and jackets and things like that. It's not like he's got wings that are like making his trench coat, hang out further than his back because he can't fit them in. I have seen various artists try to figure out ways to make Angel look
but it's
human.
It seems to be clear that he's lived his life figuring out how to hide his mutation.
Yes.
And for the most part, benefiting from what we're calling kind of like a lifestyle with the majority mainstream society.
Yeah.
And because he's wealthy, which this episode doesn't go into too much of his wealthy lifestyle. We just know he's the third. I think that I don't know why the third implies he comes from wealth. Maybe it's the last name Worthington.
Warren Worthington III.
But he is entertaining a young woman in this chalet, and clearly they're having some romantic
ish
weekend together.
He won't let it get too romantic, because if he has to take off his shirt, she's going to see that he's a mutant.
So he's hiding this aspect of himself.
He's sort of Batmaning it. He is holding her at bay, and says, "You wouldn't like the real me," and yet I find myself going, "Why do you even have her here to begin with?" Like he is just leading her on. Well, she thinks she's got a chance.
I mean, they both are willing adults, right? Like I think anybody has the right to say, this is where this stops for me.
Well, sure.
He's got it. But what I will agree with you on is, like, what's your strategy? Like, at what point are you comfortable? Like, it's so interesting. Like, is it something that Angel especially will come to a point where he feels like, okay, after 3 or 4 dates, I'm going to tell this person that I'm a mutant? Or
I don't think that would ever happen.
Am I just gonna like unrobe and show her?
Or no, I don't even think that would happen.
So what's your plan?
He will. That's what I'm saying. Why is she even here? This is the Bruce Wayne problem, right? This is I need to look like I've got beautiful women on my arm, and yet I am not going to get close to them. They think they are each. We've seen animated episodes where they're like, oh, he's going to put a ring on my finger, and I'm going to, like, oh no, I'm going to be the one. I'm going to be the one. They think they have a chance. This woman thinks she has a chance. And in fact, when he says, no, you don't really have a chance, she's like, why do you always do this? So it's like, this is something he's done to her, comment, over and over again. And it's because he may be similar to Rogue. He wants to emotionally connect to someone, but until he has the wings removed, he cannot. And this is one of those examples when I say that X3, The Last Stand, which is not a good movie, mirrors The Cure. It's because in that movie, Ben Foster, who plays Angel, is seen, his father's trying to get into his room, and he's concerned that the door's locked, or I guess it's the bathroom, and the kid is like, no, don't come in. And when he comes in, he has been trying to cut the wings off himself. And so this is the go-to story. This is Warren's story about absolutely not wanting to be a mutant and wanting to be just seen as a normal human being. Not so dissimilar from another character that we then meet in the first episode of X-Men 97 and have gotten to know over the course of that series. Someone who comes from money, does not want to be shunned by their family, does not want to be shunned by the world, and therefore would rather pretend they don't have these abilities than not. Warren just doesn't have the ability to pass quite as much because it does require him to be wearing
a ski jacket.
In this case, bundles of clothing.
He's got to be in very cold temperatures. Unlike Sabretooth, who at one point I could not understand why he would augment his mutant identity. And I basically thought he was just out there as who he is. But yes, Warren is the character who is trying to do the opposite: hide, mute, cover up, background his mutant features, which means he kind of lives a double life, because I would imagine for the most part he tries to pass as a non-mutant, but then he's also working with the scientist.
Yeah.
And his job, what's his job? What does he do for
the scientist?
Yeah. Because I know there's another
the scientist
character.
Is the one creating the cure, the machine, the device that will extract your mutation.
Okay, so Warren discovers that and goes to the island to seek the cure.
Warren is funding the cure. Warren explains to the girlfriend that he has sent Dr. Adler to Scotland to continue his research.
That's okay.
So when Warren shows up, it's with the understanding that I have been funding you and I am ready to go. Like, we should also mention, and I don't know if we have seen this in like a group photo or something. I know we've seen it in X-Men 97. There are moments, and I feel like it's okay to say this because it establishes that this sort of thing is true of the past. Warren is an original member of the X-Men. Like Angel, Charles, Scott, Jean, Iceman, Beast, Angel. So if that is true in this universe, which we have to believe it is, because yes, I am projecting forward, but in an episode of X-Men 97, someone is looking at some old photos and you see the original team in their original uniforms, and it's pre-Beast turning blue and furry. Angel is standing right there. So clearly Warren is a former member of the team. And I think that that's an important thing to note. Rogue sees on TV that a cure exists, decides to go. She leaves. Ultimately, her big rub is that she is not allowed, she's not able to touch people. If she touches you as a mutant, she is going to not only sap your strength, but she's also going to temporarily take on your mutant abilities. And she may not even be able to control them depending on what those abilities are. If you are a simple human being, she could potentially kill you because...
I think they're called traditional Homo sapiens.
Sure. That's what for the layman's terms, that's simple human being. Well, you've got the Homo sapiens, then you have Homo superior, which are the mutants.
Well, for some reason, Professor X calls them traditional Homo sapiens.
Oh, sure. Well, okay. But yes, if you are a traditional Homo sapien, she could potentially kill you because you don't have the mutant ability to necessarily withstand just how much she is draining from you. So that's why Rogue is constantly covered by everything head to toe. I shouldn't say head to toe, neck to toe, because she can't touch you. And actually, I want to pull Eric and Julia's book and reference this once again. This is X-Men, the art and making of the animated series. Again, it's a fantastic resource. I have marked the description of Rogue as written by Eric in the Writer's Bible for the animated series. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to read it here, if that's okay with you, so that we can get a real glimpse into what the writers were thinking about her. Rogue is a good old Southern gal in her mid-20s. Her special mutant power enables her to absorb other people's powers just by touching them. This also renders them unconscious, and with continued exposure can permanently take their consciousness away. She is invulnerable and can fly. Both powers she absorbed from others. We know who, but we haven't learned that within the show yet. The mind and memories of others can occasionally emerge, running around in her head, coexisting with her own mind. We saw that with Juggernaut, where he was yelling about their childhood and
she absorbed that trauma.
She absorbed that trauma. Rogue can't turn this power off and on. This means that, to her great sadness, she cannot touch other people, lest she steal them away. Even a kiss is too dangerous to risk. Rogue was on her own until discovered by the leader of the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, Mystique. She raised Rogue like a daughter, and there is a close bond between them. Rogue left Mystique as a matter of rebellion, the need to be her own person and grow away from her surrogate mother. So she sought out the X-Men, who most grudgingly accepted her onto the team. Getting the full trust of the X-Men, especially Wolverine, is going to be tough. Now, obviously, that part of the story has come and gone. She is a full member of the team. No one seems to question it, not like they do, say, Gambit. I would say that she is pretty solid in her standing on the team. That description did give us a little bit of a spoiler that we have not learned within the context of the animated series yet. But again, that's an important piece of information because in this episode, we are officially introduced to Mystique as well, who, yes, did raise her as a daughter. But this sadness, this great sadness, has caused Rogue to consider the possibility of living without her mutant abilities. And she leaves the group sad, angry. And part of that is because she is triggered by how much human connection the other members have.
Right. So other mutants can still, most of them, if not all the ones that live in the manor, can hug each other and have physical relationships and intimacy, which
Scott and Jean especially,
which are part of, the needs that, whether you're a mutant or not, the needs that we have as people to be bonded and to be intimate with folks and to build not just emotional trust, but also a sense of physical comfort.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have access to these things. So her feelings of isolation and thwarted belongingness and just the bitterness of being alone, right? All those feelings culminate for her. And so the idea of becoming a traditional Homo sapien, it really is desirable. It becomes this identity that is sought after for some mutants, especially for her. And as observers, we might think, at least at first glance, she's so powerful. She can fly. She can, she can zap other people's powers. Like she
and at
has
one point in time, Angel
control.
even asks her, how can you fly without wings?
Well, so this is the interaction that I was referencing. This happens much later in the episode, but that is a mutant. So Angel is a mutant who relies on wings to fly, but he can fly. And he, passes her. They encounter each other toward the end of the episode. And she dives into the sky. And he's like, you're lucky. He just makes this comment toward her. Like, I have these gigantic, I'm sure in his mind, he doesn't say this, but he probably has this self-referential hatred. I have these gigantic things coming out of my body. Yes, I can fly, but I'm unsightly. And wow, you can fly.
Meanwhile, he is so hot.
Okay, so this is the sadness of
this is the dysmorphia.
Yeah. Well, dysmorphia might be a good word for it at first, because I can see how both characters struggle with acceptance and finding strengths in their differences and seeing their mutant abilities as these amazing characteristics.
And that's what Adler tells Rogue as well, is you're so beautiful and you're so strong.
Why would you want to get rid of this? And I think that's such an important part of this episode. The entirety, the message of this episode is, why would you want to erase a part of yourself that is unique to you, that is amazing, that is powerful, that is an asset? And the person in that body just feels so
burdened,
dysmorphic. I think the word you used is good. It's dysmorphic. It's the sense of the thing that is causing me this pain is the very thing, I want to rid myself of.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of counterfactual thinking which happens after trauma or identity related trauma, and the counterfactual thinking is the what if. What if I didn't have these unsightly wings? What if I didn't have this power to take other people's abilities and zap them out of their bodies? What if I were a quote normal human being?
Yeah.
Would my life be better? And those distortions, that's what creates the dysmorphia. That's what creates the sadness. And every mutant is probably going to have in their own development some wrestling with how to make sense of this difference, how to accept it, how to live with it, and how, to kind of go through these phases. In fact, I'll make this up. In our world, we have in psychology these frameworks around identity development, and that has to do with gender and race and ethnicity and all sorts of different identity characteristics. And I map them onto this mutant development or mutant identity development framework that I'm just kind of making up, which is the concept or has concepts that are very similar to these other identity development frameworks. In the very beginning, there might be confusion, denial, uncertainty. In the middle, there's this sense of wanting to be like others. Mm-hmm. In fact, there's this misalignment there. It's this inner conflict and almost like a self-denial. Like, I'd rather be like the majority unoppressed people than be in this body. And so you get all these negotiations, like, how do I kind of like conform and align with mainstream identity? And that could last for a period of time. And then eventually, developmentally, if all is progressing toward a healthy identity development, you go toward acceptance.
Yeah.
And seeing the strengths and unique qualities in yourself. And, as I said, these are very real frameworks for identity development with a lot of us.
Yeah.
And I map it on to this mutant identity concept because we're seeing different perspectives and different phases. With Rogue in particular, we're seeing that particular phase of wanting to rid oneself of the characteristics that make her a mutant and align with and assimilate to the non-oppressed majority society. And in that process is a tremendous amount of psychache and emotional pain and grief. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're seeing come through. And that's why I'm saying dysmorphia sounds like a really good word to capture all of that. But what I don't want to agree with is that this is a disease, like that the dysmorphia in your mutant identity development, just like in other identity development frameworks, while it is dysmorphic at the time, it's not a disease, it's not a disorder, it's not as if there's something wrong with you. It's just a natural progression of grief and loss related to identity.
Yeah.
And so with her, what she decides to do is take a risk, meet up with this odd-looking scientist, and nothing good can come from an odd-looking scientist. No,
he's just a short, white, old German guy. Like,
I don't like the look.
He's
of
not
him.
Quasimodo. Okay, so you don't like the look of him.
Well, and the machine that he also has this machine.
Yeah.
That kind of looks like this dark crystal-esque set of orbs and sphincters.
You're talking about Augra's.
Yes, there's all this weird stuff happening.
Okay.
So she's going to give her body up to the scientist who claims that he can cure her of this mutant identity.
She shows up, and before she's able to get into that device, Adler says, "Come back in an hour. I wasn't prepared for you. I'm not ready to do this just yet. Come back in a little while." And he closes the door, which she beat in just to get into the facility. He closes the door and reveals the real mastermind behind this whole thing, Apocalypse. So she has not yet been able to partake in the experience of having her mutant powers removed. We should make that clear.
Right.
It's not like she straps herself in just yet, and he's like, no. Give it.
He says, "Give me an hour.
Give me an hour. Give me an hour. I need to boot everything up. Takes me an hour just to put the podcast gear together. Like, give me an hour. I can have you ready to go."
Well, and meanwhile, we do meet Mystique.
Yes.
Who is...
yes, once Rogue disappears, Adler then becomes Mystique.
Right. Sorry, I didn't make that clear. Mystique is shape-shifting as Dr. Adler.
Yes. Who is dead. Presumed dead at this point.
And when Mystique shapeshifts back to Mystique, we finally meet her, and she is, a force to be reckoned with. She's clearly very powerful, poised, self-confident. There is a grandiosity there, probably well earned, but she's such a figure. I mean, this is such a very complex character in X-Men, I think.
And she does show concern for Rogue being this person that has come wanting her powers removed.
Do you think her saying, "Give me an hour"? Well, yeah, because I don't think that she needed an hour. I don't think that the so-called doctor...
Well, I think at the very least, you got to get rid of Apocalypse. Like, Apocalypse can't be in the room when Rogue decides to get strapped into the big chair. And currently, Apocalypse is hanging out behind the door. So I think at the very least, you've got to get rid of him. So you shove this person out. Plus, you're going to want to discuss with Apocalypse, who appears to be, again, the mastermind behind this whole thing, which is a sham. By the way, it does not remove your mutant abilities, we learn. Instead, it basically gives him more power. The essence. The Dark Crystal. But yeah, so yeah, it's revealed that this is not going to do what it has been advertised to do. And I think there needs to be some conversations that need to take place. She says, are we sure we want her to be, one of these people? And he's like, yeah, she's super powerful. Let's line her up. If she wants to be in the machine, let's put her in the machine. And so I think that's more what the hour was for, was we didn't expect Rogue to show up. I have a relationship with her that we don't currently know about. This machine is not going to do what we promise it will. Let's talk about this. And while she's gone, we then have an additional cat and mouse game being played between Adler and Cable, who we have seen on Genosha as this mysterious, tall, very buff. I believe he would apply, maybe based on his hair. Would he be what I just learned is called a zaddy?
Oh, is he a zaddy?
Is he a zaddy, Drea? Because he's
I
big
think
and
so. Buff,
gray hair.
I think we can call Cable a zaddy.
Okay, so he is a zaddy. And he is actively trying to find and potentially kill Dr. Adler. He attacked Warren Worthington III, believing that he might be Adler, because that's where Adler was in that chalet. Worthington then says, no, I sent him off to Scotland. Cable finds out from the girl that Adler was sent to Muir Island. Cable then goes to Muir Island. So now all these people
a lot of folks are converging
conjoining in the same place.
On Muir Island, there's also Pyro and Avalanche
Yes.
who show up there.
Who were also on Genosha. They were also in the background when Mystique was running.
You'd think they would have learned, like, don't go to this other island thinking something positive is going to happen.
Pyro and Avalanche were brought there. So Avalanche was recruited by Pyro to come to Muir Island in order to meet his old friend Mystique. Mystique was bringing Pyro in for maybe one of two reasons. One, to be muscle, to be a heavy in Apocalypse's army, or perhaps Mystique was trying to lure Pyro and anyone he wanted to bring in.
I think so.
Into the machine.
I think so. I think it was like a recruitment strategy.
Right.
Like bring your +1,
yeah.
And then suddenly they're slaves for Apocalypse.
Oops.
So what does Mystique get out of this? Mystique doesn't need slaves. Mystique doesn't need Apocalypse. Like, why would Mystique partner with Apocalypse with this?
It's just what she does. I mean, I can't really talk about that too much because we've not seen other people that she's partnered up with yet necessarily. So,
what we do get the sense, going back to identity, is that Mystique has no interest in letting go of her mutant powers.
Correct.
Right? Like Mystique is so...
She is firmly identified as...
when we look at this made up framework that I'm working with now, in terms of mutant identity development, she is further along the progression. She's like toward acceptance stage, if not celebration stage. Like right. I'm like, so, and I feel like Sabretooth is there too.
Yeah.
This is who I am, and I am not only willing to actualize my identity in any public space, but I am confident doing so. I'm proud of myself. Everything is ego syntonic. So everything that I feel, believe, and think is in alignment with my identity and who I feel I am. And that allows Mystique to... what I'd say about that is that allows Mystique to feel confident and self-driven in the things that she's doing.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what her end goal is.
Yeah.
But certainly we see a mutant who is very confident with who she is and has no problem presenting as her natural self, and just uses her shape-shifting ability to the benefit of this, this bigger cause.
Right. So I think we're going to learn more about Apocalypse's grand plan. Charles and Moira are already there. Scott shows up with the plane to the Blackbird to notify Xavier that Rogue has gone off to Muir Island for this for the cure. A battle takes place, and she is ultimately not only she isn't rescued so much as she learns it's her powers that give her the strength and ability to connect and be with others in other ways than to touch them. Like she can help her friends. She can save her friends and her family. Jean falls off a cliff toward the water and Rogue rescues her. Is that necessary? Because Jean
can do anything,
got the ability
but
to,
in the moment she did help.
Yeah. So this helps Rogue understand that her powers are in many ways defining who she is as a person. And so she then has a deeper respect for the gifts she has been given, rather than the price that she has to pay. And that means not necessarily being able to ever kiss a boy again. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we'll see where that goes. And
it's Dr. Adler, aka Mystique shapeshifting as Dr. Adler, who says, You must live forever in the prison of your mutant powers.
Yeah.
And that's directed at Rogue as if to say, I think, because I don't think Mystique, it's interesting. I don't think Mystique believes that they're thwarted in any way by their powers. I think that is Mystique through Adler saying, so long as you see this as restricting you, you will be in this prison. You know, like it's all about perspective. I love what you said about like, if you give this away, you give a part of you away.
Yeah.
How do you define yourself without your mutant characteristics? It's pretty much what makes you.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that was Mystique's way of lending out some wisdom that can sit with Rogue moving forward and hopefully will keep her from making these decisions to change who she is.
Right. So obviously, as all the episodes do, this one will continue onto the next episode. I really do love the serialized nature of the show and how they can just jam so much into tiny arcs, but we still get so much out of them. What did you think of this episode, Drea?
I really, really liked it. I think they jam-packed a lot of mutants on this island. Toward the end, you just saw a lot of characters and a lot of things going on. But the message of this episode really was about centering that psychache that mutants feel, the sense of living a life with what society is telling you is a detriment or an impairment or something you should be ashamed of. And we see these characters work through how they deny it, bargain with it, negotiate with it, try to get away from it, try to escape it. And with Rogue in particular, we kind of see her inch toward the next phase of her identity development, which is to move past that internalized shame.
Yeah.
She can live outside of the system that oppresses her, right? It's not overnight. So what I love about this episode, as much as the other episodes too, is that this is one snapshot of that movement, of that development, and we'll see more and more how things shift and change.
And by the way, it's either a small step or it's a giant leap, but it's still just one step. It's still just one movement forward. It's not like Rogue is suddenly going to be cool with not being able to touch people, because at the very end, after she saves Jean, Scott hugs Jean and then looks over at Rogue and says, Rogue, you have no idea what this means to us. And on one hand, it's true. She doesn't have any idea because she can't hold Jean the same way that Scott is. She can't hold Scott the same way Jean is, etc. But on the other hand, she absolutely knows what this means because she can't have it. And she knows the importance of what they're able to do in this moment.
She knows that she's missing out on something,
and she cries,
and it has so much value. It's such good writing.
Yeah.
Well, and likewise, they also didn't solve this bigger systemic problem with society, right? Like we've just taken care of regulating some emotions. We haven't resolved this bigger global issue, and we're not going to.
Yeah.
And so there's some sense of resolution and some sense of, finding moments of joy and finding moments of self-awareness and consciousness of one's identity. And then there's also the acceptance that this bigger problem is not going to go away.
So we should say that the story with Apocalypse is not yet over, because Rogue, without knowing that Mystique is Adler, helps him put the machine and everything back together. And then leaves, and then that's when Worthington shows up, right, and says, "I'm ready. Let's do it." And Adler goes to Apocalypse and says, "Rogue's gone, but I got him. What do you think?" And he's like, "Let's do it." So, so now we'll see where this goes from here. But I'm excited to find out.
You're excited for Angel to be de-winged?
I am excited to see the next stage in Angel's evolution.
Okay.
It's very exciting to me.
Why is it that we always see Angel and Pyro in the same episodes? Or like in the same... Because in the movies, you also get introduced to Angel and then Pyro's there.
Well, but Pyro in the movie, like, he was there from the beginning. Pyro was there because he was buddies with Iceman. And then in the second movie, at the end of the second movie, I think... I could be wrong about this, but it's been a long time since I've seen the movies. At the end of the second movie, Pyro then leaves with Magneto.
Yeah. And
then in the third movie, Pyro is fully a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants.
Okay.
Pyro, by the way, in the movies, played by the guy who plays Cole in 12 Monkeys.
Okay. Wow.
As baby Cole.
Yeah.
But... No, just a little connection.
Okay.
But yeah, so Drea, until next time, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, and on Instagram, Dr. Drea Psychology. Check out our Discord, which you can find on the Arkham Sessions Instagram. Just look at the bio and you'll find the link there.
Very cool. You can find me on Instagram. I am at B_Ward028. You can find us both on Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. You can email us at arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Come join us on Facebook, and be sure to follow our family over at Fanbase Press. Check out their news, their articles, their other podcasts. They're absolutely fantastic folks to work with. And so I think you will have a good time. If you like our show, you're going to like them. I want to thank some of our patrons who have made this episode and all of our episodes possible. Mike Ficklin, Dr. Jerome Anderson, Antonio Lopez, Kevin Ortel, Todd Stashwick, Heroes Journey Fitness, Trevor Schwartz, Suarez Ali, Mark Pepper, Frank Muller, Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, and of course my father, Carl Ward. Thank you all so much for your help. Each and every dollar that you lend to us really does make this possible. It also makes things like going to WonderCon and Comic-Con to have panels for you all possible. So we appreciate that, and so do our other listeners. If you want to have your name called out on the next episode of the podcast, just go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. Join the $5 tier. There are other tiers as well. You can get early access to every episode at a single dollar. You can get the ability to choose what we're going to cover next, which, interestingly and shockingly enough, Drea, is coming up pretty soon, because we're coming up at the end, to the end of season 1 of X-Men.
Well, and there's also video now of our podcast. You can watch videos of our podcast.
Exactly, and that's currently exclusive to our patrons, so you can go to that tier where you get to see video versions of this podcast. There are so many tiers. Go check them out. Find the one that you like the most, and we're happy to have you. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
I'd better take you home.